the current version, how we see how the media is spinning, twisting, and lying about political events in order to justify war and warfare, is that a recent phenomenon to this extent, or how we are seeing it implemented, or is it just the latest version of what has been going on for 2000 years?
I think war propaganda is as old as the war. It started with Jules Caesar, who were conquering France and Belgium and so on. And he was at the same time the journalist. I mean, he was writing a book about war in France, and he was explaining his ambition was to become emperor in Rome. So he was making the war and he was sending his version of the war to Rome. So it started then. And you have a very good example. The First World War was actually, in my view, a war between several imperialism who want to divide or redivide the world. And you had German imperialism, you had French and British imperialism, Russian too. Each side was saying, we are the good ones, and the other are the evil and the monsters and so on. In Great Britain, to sell the war to the population, they invented that the German army invading Belgium was killing babies, already babies, by plunging knives in the stomach and so on. Horrible stories. You have a very good Belgian historian, Anne Morelli, who published a book from a British lord, Lord Ponsonby, and he invented this concept of war principles of propaganda. And that book shows how the British, and there are a lot of images, not photos at the time, of course, but drawings to show the atrocity of the Germans. So we had to make war. And the war was absolutely unjust, was absolutely an imperialist war from both sides. And the only good position was, we don't want war, we don't want to participate. And for that, Jean Jaurès was assassinated in France, and a lot of soldiers who refused were executed because they refused the idea of the war, the reality of the war. So it's not new. You cannot make a war and get money for that and get soldiers to be killed if you don't lie. The question is, of course, with the techniques, with the marketing, they improve the techniques. And now with artificial intelligence, we see that, but it's an old story. And you have to study the new forms, but you have to also to educate the people about the past, because now it's very sensitive. And if you come and say, well, in Ukraine, it's not exactly as you are told, you will get the reaction of your teacher there, very emotive, furious. Actually, people are afraid. They are afraid to see that all they believe, the information they believe in, it's not true. Maybe you have to change your mind about that. That's very
Scary.
dangerous. And so I think it's very important that the people study, and it should start at school, study the examples of previous media lies, because there it's less in discussion and you can learn from the past.
The thing is, we know them, right? I mean, one of the most famous examples of war lies, at least in the German-speaking part of Europe, is Hitler's claim that Germany was attacked by Poland in 1939. And, you know, since the morning hours, we're shooting back. That's a very, very famous line. And the Germans, or a large part of the German public, is most easily convinced that, you know, you have to fight against Russia. We even have to send Taurus missiles, very important, support for Israel, because the poor Jews constantly under attack by evil Nazis, Middle Eastern Nazis currently. That's the framing. Why is it that this knowledge of the past doesn't translate into criticism about ongoing lies that are coming in and being accepted?
Well, you are right to mention that Hitler was, of course, applying these 5 principles of war propaganda. He was hiding that it was an imperialist economic war. He was paid by the big German business, Krupp, Thyssen, the steel, the chemistry, and so on, to have more space, more markets, more resources, and to plunder and the oil was already a big reason in that war. Of course, he was also using what I'm calling the 4th principle: present yourself as the victim, as the attacked. And indeed, the German people were attacked. So it was a sort of preventive war. We attacked because we are in danger. And of course, this propaganda was very strong because Goebbels used in a very intelligent manner the new invention of the radio. And it was, well, the German population was suffering from poverty, from unemployment, from a lot of things. The Communist Party was very strong at that time. You almost had a revolution in 19, a socialist revolution in Germany. And then Hitler and the forces behind him had to find a responsible. And indeed, the foreigners were attacking Germany, so we have to make a preventive war. What you mentioned is, why are the people around us not aware with all these examples? I would say, first, do not speak about the people, because you have several categories. Some people are well conscious and aware, and they try to explain that around themselves, and it's not easy. When you go against war propaganda, it's not easy to talk about that, and we see how difficult is the discussion around Israel now. It's less difficult than before. It has always been a very difficult discussion, and I'm trying to help the people to better explain, better convince, better discuss. Do not discuss with emotions, discuss with facts and checking facts together and things like that. Then you have a majority of the people who feel that they cannot trust the media. And you can see in the polls that a lot of people say, I don't trust the media. But in the same time, they feel in the trap about Ukraine and a lot in Syria and so on. So it's complex. It's also normal. A lot of people don't have time to study that. A lot of people who are working, well, they have long journeys because before you were working in the factory or in the office, and when you got back home, it was finished and you had time for yourself and the family and maybe read, study, discuss, and so on. And now with these telephones, you never stop to work, because your boss can call you or can send you, and you have to work in the evening, in the weekend. A lot of people in my country, there are a lot of burnouts because you work constantly. So people are tired. They come back from the office. They have to work, the children and so on. So you are tired. What you do, you look a little bit at the television, you see a good movie, and then I don't blame them. I think we need to look how we are going to attract these people, to tell them, think about it, because for making war, they use your money, they use maybe your son or your daughter, and they provoke terrorism and so on. So be aware that good information is also your problem. And I think we have to find a way to attract the people in a very popular and simple way. For example, now, besides of the books, I'm producing videos. One format of video which is called La Minute Michel, the minute Michel. So it's less than 2 minutes, and I'm reacting about some event of yesterday, or some quote, or some post, and so on, or the speech of Macron today, and so on. And I'm trying to explain to the people what is hidden there and how they should analyze it. And that's sort of, because, I will never be invited anymore in television. And then you have to find ways to reach the people with the social networks and short videos and so on. But not only that, I really encourage people to read books, to study, because that's the best way to study and really deeply understand. Reading books, taking notes, making it your own, and so on, and be active in the discussion. I'm encouraging people to discuss not only with friends and people who already agree on that, but especially discuss with people who do not agree, who are influenced by the Zionists or the war propaganda, and and it is well possible. If you have a good method, if you keep quiet and calm, and if you discuss with the method, I think it's really possible.
Right, right. And in a sense, it's also dangerous that we start preaching to the converted, right? That we only discuss within the same group, and then the other group, the 80%, their narratives remain unpierced, unharmed. Yeah.
Yes, and you have the impression that things are good and so on, because if you talk with people who agree with you, it's nice, it's pleasant, but the real work is to convince new people.